Chapter 1: The Peculiar Bookmark. Clara Finch had chosen the library because it felt, in that particular moment of deadlines and dithering, like the sensible thing to do. Sensible, she told herself, was the only armor she had any hope of wearing properly when faced with a school project titled Local Histories and Legacies. She imagined neat quotations stitched into a single page, perhaps a faded photograph from a family scrapbook, something that would make the essay seem lived in rather than invented. The house obligingly behaved the way old houses do when they are not trying to show off. It exhaled a particular complicated fragrance of boiled tea curling up from the kitchen, lemon polish taking the mantel as if apologizing cheerfully for its own brightness, wool warmed by a day's patience, and the faint sentimental scent of old glue and attic summers. Stained glass tossed small, serious jokes across the book spines. Red and green, and a blue that tried very hard to be midnight, lay like warm, awkward fish across the leather, making some titles wink as if embarrassed by their own age. Clara moved through the shelves with the authorized air of someone temporarily permitted to rearrange history. She claimed the small triumphs of the industrious, pulling a book free and feeling dust rise in dignified, tiny clouds that smelled faintly of cloves and sawdust, sneezing with the comic gravity of someone in a period drama. The shelves were a tangle, honest and stubborn, built before anyone in the Finch family had developed the faintest inclination for order. They had thickened over decades into a pleasing disorder of sensible reference works, battered atlases, and baffling curiosities that seemed to have decided they might as well live there for good. Bird encyclopedias propped up an atlas, 2 cookbooks leaned apologetically against directories. Postcards slid into margins and spoke in tiny, secretive stamps about summers that smelled of salt and humidity. Clara's fingers skimmed leather, linen, cloth, and boards, the textures of other people's carefulness, and she read titles with the precise, slightly hungry eye of someone composing a report. When her fingertips brushed embossed letters, they came away with nothing but the faint memory of ink. Then, as if the library itself enjoyed surprises, her nail caught on something which made the world quiet in a particular private way. A narrow ribbon tucked between volumes of identical gray histories, the sort of hiding place that suggested deliberate secrecy rather than accident. It peeped like the crown of a very small hat, gilded metal like filigree leaves curled around an oval that might have been a gem, except that, as Clara squinted and thought a little too quickly of fairy tales she had read and lectured herself against, there was a faint thrumming of light from within it. The light breathed, and off so slow it might have been a blink, exactly like a small, polite chest. The ribbon was the color of bruised plums, warm to the touch and faintly scented with bergamot, which made Clara smile despite herself, because grandmothers, in her experience, liked bergamot and neatness in equal measure. When her thumb rested against the oval, the thrumming quickened, a small thing acknowledging another small thing. She frowned, the way Clara expressed the mixed feelings of a child who knows at once that she ought to be sensible and that being sensible rarely makes for a good story. "Mrs. Finch?" her grandmother's voice called from the sitting room, warm as toast and steady as the cluster of clocks that kept that room company. "Tea's ready." The bookmark impossibly felt warmer than the sitting room itself, warmth like a pocketful of sunlight or like the hug of a living thing that had been sleeping and was now awake. A prickle climbed the inside of Clara's forearm, small, exact, and deliciously alarming, and she read the nameplate riveted to the shelf with ridiculous, private happiness. Finch, Family Histories. It seemed both absurd and perfectly sensible that something this curious should be lodged among their records. She eased the ribbon free and held it as if it were a found bird, careful palms, gentle, not wanting to wake more than necessary. She carried it into the sitting room because the clocks there behaved like elders, and because her grandmother's knitting made the place feel like a soft argument, tidy, insistent stitches set in polite opposition to ordinary raggedness. Theo had promised to bring a sketchbook after school. Mari, who kept lists like armor, would be late only if the world itself were at last falling apart. Sam, quiet, thoughtful, the sort of boy who said no first and reconsidered later, was the one Clara worried about most. She pictured his earnest face and decided that curiosity and the need for witnesses outweighed timidity. They met in their usual tangle, three youths folded into one another like a very badly tied knot, which, if anyone looked for it, was always the sign of a proper friendship. Look, Clara did not bother with ceremony. She thrust the ribbon towards them before she could change her mind. Theo blinked. Paint flecks in the crook of his thumb and a pencil kept perpetually behind his ear like a talisman. His first thought went instantly to drawing, because Theo believed that anything deserving of attention deserved to be sketched. Mari's phone buzzed once, and she turned it face down as if the gadget itself required discipline when conspiracies were afoot. Sam tucked his limbs into himself and cultivated an expression of unimpressed caution in case it proved useful. "It's pretty," Theo pronounced, trying to be casual and failing because every time he liked something, he made a small, embarrassing sound as if a bell had rung inside him. "What is it? An old pin?" "It's a bookmark," Clara said, slightly haughty, because discovery in her book deserved dignity. "But it's warm." She did not tell them about the small, irregular, low thrum of light. She turned it in her fingers like someone displaying a fossil. "Found it behind the history books." Sam made a noise that could only be described as the sound of objection beginning to form. "Do you think it's one of Grandma's antiques? She's always telling me not to touch anything that's marked 'Do Not Touch.'" Clara's smile became conspiratorial. "Not marked. That's the point. That means it's either very old and very proper, or very new and very secret." Mari, who could fold a timetable into a weapon, put her phone aside and leaned forward with the efficient curiosity of a judge about to give a verdict. "Why bring it here? Clara, we have homework, after-school club, and a bus timetable. This looks like trouble." "That's exactly why." Clara felt words gather in her like a flock of impatient birds. "Because it's trouble. It's probably an odd heirloom, but—" She paused. The ribbon thrummed faintly against her palm like a small, patient answer. "It glows." At the mention of light, the strip within the ribbon steadied from a flutter to a clear beam, as though a lighthouse had made up its mind. A laugh, nervous, tight, and entirely theirs, bubbled and broke between them, every syllable saying what it meant to be 13 in a sleepy town and to find something that might matter. "If it's a puzzle," Theo said, "I want to sketch it." He tapped his sketchbook as if to hypnotize it into cooperation. "If it's a—" He had no single word for magic. He had a dozen for texture and tone. "If it's a puzzle, I want to look at it when the light is better." "After school?" "We can come back," Mari said briskly. "Plan it. Check what it is. Don't get arrested." Sam's sensible face tightened into a frown of reasonable objection. "Sensible plan. Leave it where you found it, and write about the time you almost touched your grandmother's property." Clara smacked his arm with a practiced familiarity that softened even his prudence. "We're not leaving it," she said. "It's only across the hall. We'll be back before the clocks have finished their gossip." It was easier to agree with Clara when she had that look, the look that convinced small rebellions were a perfectly acceptable form of romance. The bookmark shimmered as if in agreement. They left the sitting room in a flourished disarray of rucksacks and chair legs and the friendly, insistent tick of grandfather clocks. The ribbon's warmth sat against Clara's pocket like a small animal. Sometimes she felt it as keenly as a resonance and wondered, in the bright part of her mind that liked questions, whether it somehow knew her better than she knew herself. When they returned, the library had changed by some small, private law of light. The long, slanting afternoon made shadows intimate, as if the air had been drawn in to confer. On an oak table, where envelopes lay in a sleepy pile and a pair of tortoiseshell spectacles slept like a resting animal, one book lay open, as though an absent-minded scholar had been interrupted mid-sentence. It was different to the others, the leather dark as night, bare of title, with faint runes inked along the edge that winked and rearranged themselves when Clara's fingers approached, letters shuffling like children with a set of building blocks. Theo crouched with the sensible reverence of an artist catching something about to make a scene. When he brushed the leather, the book dimpled, not unlike water when something small presses its fingertip to the surface. A ripple ran from Theo's palm, and for a single breath, the cover behaved like a small tide. Mari's chair scraped, and she stepped back with the kind of practical alarm that had seen her through 1,000 logistical emergencies. "That's not normal," she said. "No," Sam agreed, for once the voice in his chest sounding older than the one that usually insisted on common sense. "That's not normal at all." The runes kept rearranging themselves into different little games of meaning. Theo had the shining look of someone who found rules inconvenient. He wanted to measure, to sketch the angle of light, to find a rule, and then draw the exceptions. He reached and drew his hand away quickly because there is a special, doddering politeness children observe in the presence of the extraordinary. "It's a book," Clara said, which was both the most true thing and the most insufficient. "Let's read." Mari folded her hands, that neat gesture she made when weighing consequences like coins. "Read what? The title?" "No." Clara produced the bookmark from her pocket as if producing credentials for an adventure. The filigree was warm, the ribbon stretched like a narrow moon. "Read aloud, together." The room held its breath as if it were a thing able to listen. If there was one rule the four of them had learned painfully and joyously, it was that secrets liked witnesses. Mari decided she would be the sensible witness. She would weigh the risk and bear the responsibility. "We say it together," she ordered, and the word carried the authority of a small admiral. Slowly, clear. "If anything feels wrong, we stop." Sam drew one steadying breath. The question of danger tugged at him like a small, reluctant tide. "And if it's dangerous?" he asked, voice smaller than he intended. "I don't like dangerous." Clara laid a hand on his sleeve, equal parts promise and plea. "We'll look after one another. We'll read the first page and then we'll close it. We'll seal it with the bookmark." Theo had already extracted his sketchbook. He tapped his pencil as if to summon inspiration. "If it moves, I'll draw it. If it sings, I'll draw the notes." "You draw everything," Mari observed, fox-like. "Only the worthwhile things," Theo said, which was as honest a claim as any artist could make. They arranged themselves like an assembly convened for a peculiar purpose. Clara at the head, Mari like a steward, Sam like a concerned parent, Theo like an excited chronicler. Clara felt the ribbons hum through the wood as if the bookmark had migrated its warmth into the table's grain. She opened the book with hands that trembled a fraction, a careful movement like unfolding a letter from someone one loved. The first page looked blank, smooth, smelling faintly of cedar and the ghost of old glue. And then, as if embarrassed to be noticed, ink bled up like a tea stain spreading in water. Letters arose like flowers. They took their time and behaved as if preparing an audience. The runes did not hand over meaning in a hurry. They shuffled and polished themselves and then kindly formed words. Their first sentence could have been an ordinary beginning. A meadow where sunlight perched like a tame bird, a breeze with gossip, a path that might show you where you meant to go if you would only stop trying to be sensible. And then the letters made themselves into a greeting that felt both personal and disconcertingly anticipatory. "Welcome," the page said, or rather, the handwriting unfurled in ink as if inclining its head. For a full ridiculous second, the four of them exhaled together. It was a sound part relief, part mockery at their own astonishment, and entirely the noise conspirators make when a secret proves true. The runes, pleased to have been noticed, danced less and settled into a patient print. Theo leaned forward, pencil poised like a conductor's baton, because the first instinct of an artist is to hold up eyes and say, "See, that's nice," he murmured. "It's as if the book is alive." "It's not alive," Sam said, with the reflexive sturdiness of someone who believed in the comforting solidity of paper. His certainty gave way almost at once to curiosity, which folded around him like a softer coat. "Books are paper." His last syllable unwound into wonder and sat there on the air like a small pleasant fact. "They're reacting," Mari said. "It's listening." There was a hush then, one of those perfect hushes that makes you aware of household noises you had never before noticed, the faint clink of spoons in the kitchen, the soft settling of a curtain, the clocks making the deliberate tick that in Clara's head always sounded like the house polishing itself for visitors. The library's dust and careful order made it laughable to suppose anything there had been waiting for them. And yet the bookmark had been warm, the ribbon had shimmered, and the book had arranged its runes into a welcome. They sat, four small soldiers of curiosity, listening to a book that had decided it liked the sound of their voices. Clara's fingers found the bookmark again. The metal was pleasantly warm, like someone breathing against the back of her hand. "We should read on," she said, voice small with that particular wanting that makes people braver than they would be alone. "Just the first page. Then we'll stop. Then we'll make notes for the project." Mari, forever the practical strategist, agreed at once. One page out loud. We mark where we stop, and then we decide if this is for school or a thing to be left alone in Grandma's library. Sam, who disliked open-ended adventures for practical reasons, looked as if a decision were something weighing on him like a suitcase. Theo twitched with the particular impatience of an artist who knows good scenes arrive rarely and must be welcomed when they do. They nodded together in that quiet, firm way people do before committing to a risky thing. Clara set the bookmark across the book's seam as if laying a hand on a fevered forehead. The ribbon brightened like a lamp, taking notice. The runes steadied and arranged themselves into the polite kind of print a careful host might use. The air made a sound like turning paper without a hand, a whisper that might have been wind or the book clearing its throat. They read in the soft chorus that comes first from uncertainty, consonants clipped like pebbles, vowels like sighs, and then with a growing sympathy between the paper and the room. The sentences that rose from the ink were at once ordinary and utterly not. A meadow that hummed like a kettle, daisies that sang half-forgotten seaside tunes, a path that promised to show you where you meant to go if you stopped needing to know. The book wrote itself as it was read. The ink dried as if relieved to be seen. When the last syllable of that first page fell, the leather gave a final ripple like a small wave reaching ashore, and Clara closed it with both hands in a movement careful as folding a map. The bookmark lay across the seam, thrumming faint and steady as if satisfied. They sat a while longer, 4 small shadows in lamplight, listening to the house continuing its ordinary business. Knives clinked from the kitchen, clocks ticked a little louder in an effort to be part of the story. And through all of it, the bookmark throbbed like a patient, polite second heart. The house did not tell them what would happen next. It did not need to. The book had said welcome, and the bookmark's resonance, perched against Clara's palm, felt like an invitation held delicately on the rim of a teacup, rather than thrust at them with any hurry. Between the gentle invitation and the patient glow, something waited. Polite, expectant, like a guest who had arrived early and poured tea. They left the library the way conspirators leave the scene of a minor felony, carefully with quiet laughter and the rustle of rucksacks, promising themselves in the small, brilliant way only friends can promise that they would return. On the staircase, their footsteps fell like knocks on a confidential door. Clara felt the ribbon as surely as she felt her own resonance, that persistent, soft insistence which made her realize she had stepped, quite unwillingly and perfectly, onto the threshold of something much larger than a school project. She thought of the Finch nameplate by the shelf and had an odd moment of pride. Not the loud kind, but the small, secret pride of someone who discovers that her family's library had been keeping a secret very much worth keeping. As the sun went down and the house made the ordinary preparations of an evening, clocks arranging themselves like a chorus, kettles blessing the room with steam, Clara kept one hand curled around the bookmark in her pocket like a small talisman. She could not and did not yet want to know whether this was a single mirage of possibility or the beginning of something that would, in its own time, change everything. It was enough for now that they had found it, that they had read the first page together, and that the book, quite politely and with the soft smile of ink drying, had answered them. The ribbon's resonance matched the rhythm of her breath, steady and expectant, and when she climbed the stairs, the house seemed for once to be smiling back. In the sitting room, her grandmother hummed while she piled cups. The clocks counted the seconds as if keeping score of small, safe things. Clara tucked the bookmark inside her pocket and felt, against fabric and skin, a warmth that was less an answer than a promise. It suited her, in a way she had not expected, to think that sensible armor could be so easily set aside. Somewhere, the book waited, patient and proper as a guest who has brought its own tea.